And we're just going to give it a couple more minutes for people to come in. And this is Resilience Through Trauma through the We Heal US. And very grateful for the governor of Pennsylvania to give this opportunity to get some very important programming to people. And so we'll just give a couple of minutes. And so Stephanie has joined us. And Stephanie, feel free to come off of mute if you like. If you want to share a little bit about yourself. And I see Heidi, you've come to join us. Thank you very much, Heidi.
Hello.
I thought I'd give a couple of minutes. Before we start, we'll just give it a minute or two because I know a couple of people are planning on showing up. And so Heidi, you're from Oregon. And I don't know if you'd like to put in the chat how you identify as your role in education or beyond, or how resilience resonates with you in what particular capacity or area. A clinical social worker, Stephanie. Process of a new job. Wow, that's very exciting. Kansas. How's the weather in Kansas right now? Heidi, you went skiing today, correct? For us, it was in the 80s outside of PA here.
Yeah, it's lovely in town, but up on the mountain, it was 30 degrees and snowing.
Wow.
People are out here biking and on the river like it's springtime, but then in the mountain, it feels like it's winter. It's funny.
So Heidi and I do a lot of work together in Oregon and Pennsylvania, Arizona. And Heidi, I really appreciate you coming on, and feel free if you want to, if you notice things in the chat or if you'd like to chime in, feel free, because that's what we do so often. And I will get started. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, sorry, I had to get the earphones in and get rid of some of the noise around me.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Love to see you and hear you. Thank you so much. And you've got some exciting things up and coming, yes?
Yes.
And your profession, your work is so needed right now. So I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And we have, it all depends on how many people we're expecting. And no matter what, we always give opportunities to have discussions. And when there's a lot of people, sometimes we put people in breakout rooms so that way we can amplify the amount of conversations. I'm thinking, unless we have a bunch of people joining in a couple of minutes, that we can just stay in the large room. So feel free whenever we ask a question to just chime in, and we'd love to hear your input. Okay. So let me just stop for one moment and turn off my music. I always like to start with some music in the beginning. All right. So let me go back to sharing my screen. And so again, just to introduce myself, I'm Jennifer Osger. The topic in this webinar is resilience through trauma. And this is part of the We Heal US, specifically Pennsylvania. And this entire month, every day, there have been a series of webinars from trauma-informed lens, and how this has been something that's been in the work. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And now, especially what's been going on in our nation, we really, really need to understand trauma. And also, when I say resilience through trauma, I'm not saying that through having trauma, you become resilient. But how can you be resilient as we navigate these effects of trauma? And we're just going to admit another person who's coming in. And so just a little bit about myself. I've got this little picture of my daughter here. Who am I and why am I speaking about trauma and resilience? I've been an English teacher since 2000. I'm outside of Pennsylvania, or I keep on saying outside of Pennsylvania. I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm outside of Philadelphia. And that's a picture of my daughter and son. And that is an older picture. She's actually getting to go into her senior year, and my son is in 4th grade, but I just love the way they're smiling there. And so I just keep using that picture because I think it actually becomes more and more special the older they get. My certifications, I do teach. I've been doing 22 years in public schools in Pennsylvania. After a while of teaching English for a while, and then my daughter came along, I was really fascinated with children and babies and why we kiss them and how important it is for the first 3 years of life, and really wanted to lean into that with the students that are in my classroom. So I went to Baltimore at the Children's Guild and received brain-based instruction, trauma responsive. And then I took a sabbatical. I'd written a children's book about kissing your child. And I was able to do work in Cleveland, Case Western Reserve, on appreciative inquiry. And that's a specific type of organizational development and a facilitation technique and change management. And I'll talk a little bit about it in a minute. But I really felt that being able to have conversations in a strength-based way and appreciative inquiry was a way to do that can really support the work that we do, especially with trauma and ACEs. And also, I've been spending a lot of time in the University of Pennsylvania, the Delaware Valley Consortium for Equity and Excellence through Penn's Graduate School in Education. Excellent speakers. I would meet them. One of those speakers is how I got to go to Baltimore, and one other speaker, I'm going to be referencing her work in this as well. So I've been very fortunate to be blessed with all of these great programmings that I've compiled and put together, and I'm going to be presenting for you today. So one of the frameworks of appreciative inquiry, and I'll be showing you that graphic in a moment, is to start with really understanding your purpose and why we gather together, and to put that frame around it and that context. And since you're coming here and we're grateful of your time, we really want to get to know about your aspirations. And when you think about your definition of resilience, what does that mean to you? What are the benefits of it? And when you think about that, because that's really the theme of tonight, there's been a lot of trauma responsive workshops, clearing it through to the end now that we really know about trauma, how can our knowledge of that actually help students to thrive? So when you're here tonight, what are your hopes in relation to what you think resilience means? And I'm just going to invite people to come off of the mic when you have an answer that you might like to share with the group. Ryan, I see you're lit up, but it looks like you're on mute.
I am mute. Hold on. One
Hello.
moment, please. Let me get my, hi, everybody. Hi, Jen. Oh,
Yes.
Sarah, there we go. So we're talking about resilience. Resilience to me is like your window of stress tolerance. Like you have a certain level of stress tolerance, like you have a window like behind you. And like your window is either like open or closed, but like at a certain level, it gets like this much, this is the window, all you have. So you're working within this. So your resilience is just leaving your window open to be able to tolerate more stress. So right now my window is a little closed right now because there's just so much stress, so that's all.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing, if I'm tracking correctly, the amount of resilience may be inversely proportional to the amount of stress one might sustain. So it's the more stress, your resilience might go down, possibly. That's what I was hearing from you.
Yeah, resilience is like your capacity to manage new stress. So yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's like, how long does it last? How long can I maintain regulation before I flip out and go?
Thank you.
So
Stephanie stepped away, but Heidi, would you like to share before we move on?
Yeah, I had my definition of resilience in the chat, and I said that for me, resilience is the ability to work through, difficult situations, difficult times, and to be able to navigate those challenging emotions that come up with it and move to the other side of it. So we pass through it. We don't go around it or over it or under it or avoid it. We don't stuff it. We actually work through it. And that's resilience, is to be able to get there and keep moving forward. And for me, that isn't something that we're necessarily born with. I feel like we need to be taught those tools to get there, and we need support. It's not an easy thing to do.
And that was why I came up with that title. It's navigating something through that. So many different types of trauma, through COVID, through what has happened nationally. Some things are immediate and some things have been constant. And so tonight, I hope we're going to be leaving you with some tools that will help you navigate some of that. So I mentioned earlier, one of the lenses I use is appreciative inquiry. And if you look at this here, basically this cartoon is showing that whatever you're going to look for, you'll probably find it. And so if you're looking at a deficit and you're trying to go through problem solving, you'll definitely find this hole. And maybe if you can fill the hole, great, you're just at that nice, flat, even level. However, if you're looking at strengths and what is working and ways people can thrive, then you can analyze that and get more of that as opposed to only filling a hole. So that's really, if you think about that for the next 50 minutes we're together, that will help put a reference point for some of the work that we're going to be doing today. All right. Stephanie, did you get a chance to see that before we move on? Good. All right, so we started with this framework. It's AIR framework. Sometimes it's called the PAIR framework. And I want to share this with you because I find it to be so valuable in how to scaffold conversations with adults, with students, with family members, where looking at strengths, if you look at the top with the A, if you appreciate the past, it's analyzing the best of what was, and then what you can also think of right now, what is working, and then taking all of those strengths and what is working, projecting that into the future, and then reverse engineering it. And in the present moment, what can you commit to take action so that we can have more of what we want, as opposed to just avoiding what we don't want. So we started with the purpose and asking you, why is it important to be here? What do you think? So that way I'm really gauging you in this conversation. I'm inviting you to co-create this conversation. And so I'm unpacking that a little bit metacognitively so that you see what I'm doing with us all together. So you might do that with your students as well. Now, one thing about talking about resilience and what it is not, sometimes people tend to think that, especially with strength-based or appreciative inquiry, positive psychology, is that it's glossing things over. Oh, there's not really a problem. Everything's great. Everything's rosy. Or, you know what? You just have to gather up your strength and go forward and push on. And that can really start to, a big buzzword right now is toxic positivity. And so to make sure that we understand that talking about resilience, even though there may be something that has been very traumatic, very tragic, there are tools that we can use to mitigate some of those effects from the trauma. And there have been a lot of studies where, despite trauma, some people have been able to thrive. And why is that? And I'm thinking of someone like Oprah Winfrey, who has had a lot of trauma. And there's reasons why she was able to make it through and be successful despite. Now to say, oh, well, it was because of the trauma that made who she was, then that tends to go into that toxic positivity, or, well, at least you have this on, there's this, but at least you have that. We want to avoid that. But this is, what can we add value? How can we add value to people's lives so that they feel empowered to rise above or to go through that trauma successfully? So the official definition of resilience, according to Sarah Trubridge, she was one of the people that I met in Philadelphia. She is an educational consultant. She's done work with Race to Nowhere. She's consulted all over the country. She's done work with Board of Education. And I approached her and I said, I love your work. I want to do what you do. And I read her book, and she's been very supportive. And so in studying not only her book that she wrote, Resilience Begins with Beliefs, but also Bonnie Bernard, that was her mentor. So it's like she's continuing on this legacy of passing along this wisdom. And I'm very grateful. What she was saying is that there's, three main things. Is that recovery from trauma, or, not just bouncing back to recover, but to actually go beyond the trauma is one element. The fact that you're overcoming odds, because there are times that trauma will happen to a lot of people, and some may crumble and some may be able to go beyond that. And what is going on with that? How can we unpack that? And that kind of like what Ryan was saying too, this consistent performance under stress on a daily basis or over a long term, when you have stress over a long period, despite that, people are still able to perform consistently. So that is putting like a slighter, finer edge on that definition. Some key points from her book is that anyone can be resilient. It's not where some people are resilient, some people aren't. It is not a character trait. It is not an attribute. It is a belief. It is something that it's a state that we can be in or out of. And how can we have it where it's a sustainable phenomenon over time? So it's not like certain people are resilient and certain people aren't. It's, do we create that circumstance so people may become resilient? And that, I was referencing this a little bit, anywhere from 50 to 70%. There had been these longitudinal studies, these meta-analysis, that the majority of people who have sustained trauma, they do survive. They are able to go beyond and go through that trauma. But how can we support them to make it easier for them, and to not only just survive the trauma, but to thrive and to not have as many of those ACEs side effects from that? And the other thing that's really interesting is, how do we define trauma and how do we define resilience may be culturally based. For example, someone who goes to jail and manages to learn the social codes in jail is resilient. But whether or not we would view that as a success story because of the context may be culturally based. And I found that very interesting, that if someone is able to successfully navigate difficult situations, or to even navigate something that is out of their element, that also shows resilience. So before we get into some of those protective factors, some of those qualities that make resilience possible, there has been a lot of trauma programming, and I just wanted to go through, I don't know how many people have seen previous webinars, but I just want to go through pretty quickly what exactly trauma is, what it does to the brain before I give you the tools to go along with it. So this is the first one, and I just want to move my toolbar down so I can see. Here we go. So the triune brain, basically what it's saying is that we have different layers of development through our brain, and the one right here in the brainstem, it's basically keeping us alive. A lot of the automatic body functions. When you go into the center of the limbic system, it's more the emotions. And then finally, we have this other part of the brain that is allowing us to think through and reason. And so that blue part is really that critical part. And that's called the triune brain. So I can't possibly, go through this and do it some justice, but I want you to at least, when you're watching this webinar, to take some of these notes, and I encourage you to research this on your own. And then the next one here. Oop, why is it not allowing me to advance? Interesting. Oh, there we are. So Dan Siegel, he takes that concept of the triune brain and he talks about what happens to people's memories and thoughts and ability to make good decisions when they're under stress. So when you have the hippocampus and the amygdala right there, that is memory, where memory gets recorded and retrieved. And the amygdala is that emotion, fight, flight, freeze. And so what he says is he puts his thumb right in here and he closes it over, and it's called flipping your lid. So when you have this prefrontal cortex that gives you the ability to reason and make good decisions, you flip that and you're thinking right in that emotional, and that keeps us safe. So for example, you're getting ready to cross the street and a car's ready to go right out in front of you. You don't have time to reason, you just immediately react, right? So that is what it looks like in the modern world. When we were more of a rural society, back, and even animals, like that keeps people safe or animals safe. Do you run or do you confront your aggressor, right? So we don't have aggressors in nature anymore. We have people, we have stress. And so that's this whole concept of the hand model. And so what I like to do is I like to think about it almost like a little ball, or I have some information here, right? So we've got this information. We put it where the hippocampus will record the memory. And so it goes in there and it closes over and you can think about it. And then you get stress and look what happens to your information. You lose it, right? I just lost that piece of paper, right? So we'll show you again, right? So you recording the memory, you're closing it over. I have a test, I'm nervous, and now I don't remember. That's why you have test taking anxiety. Now think about it the other way. Let's say you're stressed when you're trying to learn. I flipped my lid. Here's the information. It's not sticking, right? Again, here's the information. I'm stressed. I'm in class. I got a lot of things going on. I can't concentrate. I flipped my lid. I can't record the memory. So that's why it's so important to keep kids calm in the classroom, right? And to bring that sense of calm. And when you know that you have students who have been traumatized, how do you keep them calm? What tools can you have to bring them that sense of calm, bring it over, and to get them more into this thinking part of the brain? Now, realizing all of those different emotions, they are temporary. Just like resilience is in a flow state, so are emotions. And chemically in your brain, they last about 20 minutes, tops. So if we can bring the brain down and keep the student in class and bring some regulation techniques in just a few moments, they can calm back down. And there are tools to do that. And we can help to bring them down. Or because we're humans, we're only human, we could say, oh, you're upset. Well, I raise you one and I see you one, and you can elevate it together. Or you can say, oh, this is stressful. We can bring it back down together. And that's what we're going to be unpacking in just a moment, some of those tools. Before we do that, let's talk about resilience and these things called environmental protective factors. What is going on in a student, in a child, in a person's environment that despite the trauma, they are still able to be resilient. They are able to go through that trauma. First one on the top, the caring relationships, to have someone who believes in them, who is always there, their soft place to fall, their psychological safety. Yuri Bronfenbrenner, he said that every student should have someone who is irrationally passionate about them, right? That's why mentorships are so important. Then down in the lower left, high expectations. Thinking about COVID, not giving people a free pass and to say, oh, you know what? We're going through a lot. Don't worry about it. We'll just slide you along. That does people a disservice. That says to people, you know what? They don't really think that I'm capable of doing much. And then people just start to give up. Well, no one even thinks that I can do it. So the heck with it. I give up. And then the last one is a meaningful contribution. In other words, your opinion matters. Your voice matters. We want to hear from you. I have high expectations of you, but I'm going to help you and you will make a difference in this world. All right. So those are the three things. And then again, just a little visual that you have the individual that is just a part of the environment. And it is how is the environment and the person interfacing with one another. And the more tools that we give that individual, the more they can interface with that external circumstances and be able to navigate things. So that was a lot. And Maya Angelou, I mentioned Oprah Winfrey. Maya Angelou is, was a big influence with Oprah Winfrey, and they've had some great interviews. And, I don't like to always just read straight from a slide, but I think this quote is very eloquent, and I want to do it some justice by just reading exactly what Maya Angelou said. I'm not sure if resilience is ever achieved alone. Experience allows us to learn from example. But if we have someone who loves us, and I don't mean indulges us, but who loves us enough to be our side, to be on our side, then it's easier to grow resilience, to grow belief in self, to grow self-esteem. And it's self-esteem that allows a person to stand up. So that middle part there, love is not indulgent. Love is that it's that unconditional support so they can thrive. It's not a pass. So here we are. And what I'd like you to do is to be thinking right now, we're going into this appreciate stage. I just gave you some background of resilience, what it means and why it's important, but I want to hear from you. Immediately thinking about this newfound knowledge. When was there a time that you were resilient? What was going on? What happened? Who was involved? And now that you know of those different environmental protective factors, which ones were in play for you that made you so resilient? I'm curious. I'd like you to tell your story. And we can see if after one or two people, are there certain themes that are emerging? So Stephanie, Heidi, Ryan, Lori, welcome. Thinking of resilience and those protective factors.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I've had quite a few different moments where I needed to show resilience under like big stressors. And I would say that, I had support at home. I'm one of those I'm thinking of was at work. And this was years ago now. And I had a lot of support at home. I felt very loved and heard. And I remember one time it was just, I was really struggling and my husband showed up for lunch, which he never did. But that was, just because he knew I really needed something. And then I had high expectations of myself. I wasn't about to give up. So I persevered through my own expectations and knew that at the time I was teaching school, and I knew that I was really benefiting my students and doing the best I could for them. So that was the meaningful contribution. And it got me through. It was a really tough time. And when the school year was over, I kind of fell apart and needed a little more support, but it definitely kept me going. I never gave up. I never stopped. It just, I was able to pause and take care though. I was able to find the tools to get through it and then beyond it. But it took some time. Anyway, that's my story.
Thank you for sharing. Ryan?
Well, of course, I've got to be the non-example. So I pushed through the end of a school year, ignoring being sick every day and just getting in because it's such a pain to make sub plans. So when the flu went through my school, I caught it, but I came into work, just kind of killed it with ibuprofen for a month just to finish up my school year. And then I figured, all right, well, June's here. Now I can get better. And I never did. And I ended up with bacterial endocarditis from a bad tooth because I was just so under stress that I just wanted to, I worked from my desk just like sick because you know how bad it is to like try to call a sub. Now it's impossible, but rather than doing lesson plans, I just came to work and I thought I could push through, but I guess I'm a good non-example because it literally nearly killed me. I literally nearly died at my desk as a martyr to my kids. And so go ahead, Jen. Yeah, that's a hard one to take.
No, that you make a very good point though, because talking about being in a flow state and the environment versus the individual, resilience, again, it's not a characteristic, it's not a quality of a person that they're inherently born with. You were resilient up to a point and it wasn't sustainable, right? So what our goal will be is to have sustainable resilience. You did push through and then crashed, and we see that a lot. So some of the tools that we're going to have that you'll be seeing in just a moment will enable people to go beyond surviving on a daily basis and pushing through, but to get to a point that is the ultimate goal is a lot of this is self-care as well. So self-care can promote resilience as well. And sometimes it's those caring relationships that will remind us. Sometimes we need reminders from caring people to do that. Stephanie or Lori, before we move on, is there anything you would like to share that talking about resilience and a time that you were able to work through successfully a hard time?
Am I muted?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I was late, by the way. I think an example I have would be when my marriage fell apart, and I really didn't think that I could go on, and I was in a really, bad spot. This was a couple of years ago, but I had a very supportive work family. I had a very supportive friendship group. And I got something in the mail. It was a random piece of junk mail, but on the back was a saying that there's no, you're stronger than any obstacle that you could overcome. And I kept looking at that every day for almost like a year. And I thought, yeah, I can do this. And, I had to be there for my kids and stuff. So while I didn't think I could get through it, I did. And I dug down deep and relied on a lot of people that were there to support me. And, I did get through it, but I can see how the supportive community is very, very important, as long as who you are as a person, thinking you can't possibly get through whatever, but you can, as long as you have people who are, encouraging you and saying, yeah, you can do it. So that's my story.
Thank you for sharing, Lori. And
Sure.
Before you hopped on, we're grateful that you could join us, is, that one small message that might have seemed insignificant really got you through. And sometimes there are those messages You just have to look for those positive messages, because you can definitely see the negatives through something like what you had to endure. And then there was something that resonated with you, that you were mindful enough to see that.
Yep.
So I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Stephanie, would you like to share, or are you good?
Sure. Mine is similar to Heidi's with school. When COVID hit, we had to obviously make some adjustments in the space in the building. And so I think it was a couple days before school, I was informed that I was going to be moving to a new room. And then a day before, I was moved to another room. And so the day that I came back to school, we had our kind of our staff meeting in the gym, and all of my things were in there, piled for everyone to see. It was like being displaced, obviously, and everyone got to see everything that I had. Anyway, the music teacher was displaced, and the PE teacher as well. They didn't have a space. And so for whatever reason, the three of us got put in the same space, even though we couldn't have our own space with COVID. I don't know, but it was probably the best thing for all of us, because every day at lunch, they were also at 2 other schools and I served 3 other schools, but every day at lunch, we saw each other through, one of the worst years ever. But honestly, I think that this last school year was worse than the COVID years. I mean, it's just awful. I don't have any other word for it, but I'm leaving that situation, and hopefully we'll find something better. And it is definitely thanks to my besties, the music and the PE teacher, that I made it. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. And again, like I said before, it's not about denying the struggles, right? It's what can we look for? How can we provide that for our students? Are these high expectations? For me, it was show choir. I did not have the best home life, and we had a show choir director, and he would demand perfection. And he would say, perfection, trifles make perfection, and perfection is no trifle. He would always say that. And he would make us work over and over and over again. And we were good as a result. And he did it in a way, though, that really made us want to please him, because we wanted him to like us. And it was just a really wonderful experience. And that got me through a lot of difficult times when I was growing up. It didn't remove the things that happened to me, but it allowed me to kind of put that little Teflon coating, so some things could slide off and not stick as much. So here's the escalator effect, where problems can go up real quick, boom, 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 boom. And so the point is to try to stop and pause it from escalating, and you can de-escalate and bring a sense of calm. And these tools that I'm going to be going through, and I can give you a copy of some of these as well, so you have them, will help bring that sense of calm, so that way students, when they are agitated, they can flip their lid and be more receptive to your caring relationship and high expectations, and so they can contribute. So we have all these different negative emotions of frustration, anger, guilt, jealousy, and we can pause that and put a different lens on it, so that we can actually flip some of those negative feelings into these positive opposites. So rather than being bored, you can be enthusiastic, or rather than being doubtful, you can have a good sense of belief. All right, so I'm going to be going through some tools for you with that. So with that said, are you ready to play and have some different strategies? They're going to be some pretty rapid fire. You can write them down, and I'll give them to you as well afterwards. If you want to give me your emails, you could put that in the chat and I can give them to you. So here are some, I've got, I believe, 12 of them for you. So the first one, it's called Name It, Flip It, Frame It. This is from a book called Conversations Worth Having. It's a great read. It's Sherry Torres and Jackie Stavros. They are appreciative inquiry practitioners as well. And so basically, rather than perseverating on the negative and looking at that hole and looking at that problem, well, what is the opposite of that thing? The positive opposite. So if a student's always coming late to class, you're late, you're late, you're late. What's the positive opposite? They're on time, or maybe even early. Why is it that you don't want them to be late? Is it that you really value punctuality? Or is it that you want them to be able to contribute to class, right? So what you do is you ask the question and you look for like the one time that they were not late, or maybe not as late. And you say, hey, you know what? I noticed you did a good job today coming in on time. When you do that, you're able to contribute to the class, and you're able to be more successful. That's great. What was going on today that you were able to make it in on time? And then they might explain, here's why. Okay, well, how might we have more, say it was a Tuesday, how can we have more Tuesdays in the future? Right? And help them navigate that. But if you just say, you're late, and one more time, you can't be late, you're missing work, that doesn't really inspire them. But to ask them, how can we get you on time? It's so simple, but now it's a conversation that is positive, strength-based, and invites them to contribute to the solution. Here's the second one. I've been teaching English for 22 years, and I've stopped marking what's wrong on their papers. I don't do it, because if I do that, it's going to make me a really good editor and a really good critic. And it's going to have the student come away with how many things they did wrong on the paper, which doesn't really inspire them to want to revise it or want to be better or even like writing. What I do is I circle or highlight all the things that I liked about the paper, told them why I liked it, and ask, how might you do more of that in the future? Maybe you could only even highlight one sentence or a couple of random adjectives in the paper. And then just say, I love those 3 adjectives. I wonder, how could you have more of those in the future? Again, strength-based. Here's another one. It's very easy to perseverate on the negative. Oh, there's this. I don't like this teacher. And oh, there's this one. But if you say, okay, well, let's wave a magic wand. What if you could have it exactly the way you wanted? What would you like? How would it be? Right? Oh, my coach is getting on me, and this is, well, if your coach could magically be exactly the way you wanted them to be, how would they be? Or, it's really tough right now. You're going through some tough times. If we had a crystal ball and we imagined you getting through this, how could you imagine your life would be? Where if we could remove that barrier, we can look into the future. You were able to get through this and you were successful. Where would you be in 5 years from now? Imagining getting through this, or in a time machine. And what that does is it gets you out of that fight or flight right now and to be projecting into the future. It's actually inviting, in a playful way, executive functioning. And then once they see that, then, okay, well, what can we do right now to help you with that? Get you a little bit closer to that. Here are some great sentence starters. So you can see if the student is stressed, you realize that the conversation or the relationship is starting to take a nosedive. So some of these questions, they do some heavy lifting for the brain, but they're very light. And so, well, how might we do something like this? Can you help me with that? Or, people are wired that complaining or negative stuff is bad. But if you say, "Ooh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about that?" And rather than arguing, "Oh, you shouldn't say that or think that way," you're validating them. And as soon as you start to ask them about it, then it closes that loop. Oh, wow, they're actually hearing me. They're actually interested in me. And again, that magical, well, what would happen if we could do this? And the other thing is, I have started to remove the word "but" from my conversations, because anytime it's like, well, yeah, but there's this, it just immediately invalidates what they just said. So yes, that's true. And you can even do a combination. That's true. And that is one way I can see your perspective. And I'm wondering what would happen. How might we do blah, blah, blah. So these are some great combinations. And then again, being very mindful, you know what? I couldn't help but notice that XYZ. So you're taking the judgment out and again, saying the word and. So those are some ways to bring some emotional intelligence and calm to some conversations. I love this one. How to give a compliment so it's meaningful. So if you are specific with what you saw, as opposed to like, hey, great job, you had an awesome day. Specifically, why it is helping them to become resilient, and then something in the future. So if you look at that here, maybe a lot of times they tend to be argumentative, and you found that nugget where they help someone. You know what? Not just good job today. I really like the way you helped Stephen, pass out the scissors. That shows that you care about them and you care about their feelings. And you know what? That's going to help you in the future. I can see you using that. You're going to do something great with that. And I do this all the time with my students. Here is the blob tree. It's very similar to the emojis, but it adds the entire body. And it also shows spatial relationships of the emotion as opposed to only variants of the smiley face. So, how are we feeling this way? Are you feeling more like a 14 on the left-hand side where you're ready to plummet? Are you just hanging on like a 1 in the lower left? Or maybe you're feeling like a 20. And again, feel that those feelings of resilience is in a flow state. And so it's okay if we're looking at a number 7, we're holding on. How can we get them to ascend? Here's another one is breath and body. It's about how to visualize your problems. And if you inhale on a count of 4, and if your posture is straight and you're inviting oxygen coming from the top of your head all the way through your spine down to grounding with your feet, and you breathe in and you teach them how to do mindful breathing. And if you go for a slow count of 4 and hold for a moment and exhale twice as long, what that does is make sure that people don't hyperventilate and get dizzy. And it gives time as they're exhaling to visualize things and pushing it out through, and give them different options of what they want to put it on. It could be something in the sky, or maybe a fish as it's swimming by, or a person walking down the street and they're holding a balloon and you just tack it onto the balloon. This is another one called heart beaming, where again, they kind of visualize and they could bring in some breath and put their hands over their heart. And they say to whatever it is, it could be a person who's giving them stress. It could be a situation that's giving them stress, society, something on the news, and to say that they wish them well and peace and joy and happiness. And then to do the same thing for yourself and to honor yourself and do self-care and self-compassion. This one is more for executive functioning, where they're going really fast and their amygdala is flying and they can't retrieve or hold the memory. What you do is proactively, when they start to get flipping their lid, the if then is, if this one thing is going to happen, they already have this plan. So if they get nervous about the quiz question, then they'll just go on to the next one. Or if I don't know the answer, well, I can do some eliminations. So if they practice that and even vocalize that and write it down and put it somewhere, that way, when they don't necessarily have that presence of mind on what to do, they know what it is. That's why we practice fire drills and other type of drills like that. Because in that moment, you forget. But if you do that memory, that muscle memory, where you practice that and you train yourself and you myelinate in your neurons, and you create that coding of practice, you'll be able to do it when you're stressed. This is a high performance technique. And this has been around since, around Henry Ford, with highly functioning, very entrepreneurial type of technique, but it works great. You have index cards by your desk, or it could be by your bed, by your desk, and if you're in your room. But it's like the first thing you do when you wake up and the last thing you do when you go to sleep are so important, and we tend to throw that away. That we wake up in the morning, the alarm goes off, or our cell phone goes off, and we rush, and at night we just crash. But if we set intentions and are grateful at night, and then we go to sleep, you literally will sleep on it. That's why we say, I got to sleep on it, because we prune through the night what's important, what's not. But if you have that in your focus as you go to sleep, and then you wake up and you revisit that, it can make students feel more empowered, more in control. And this thing right here is, you have things that you're grateful for and things that you aspire to do. And you set those intentions at night. You wake up, you look at them. Oh, I was grateful for those things yesterday. Yes, that was an awesome day. I'm going to have an awesome day. And then at night, you highlight the things you were able to do and achieve with your attentions. And the ones that you couldn't, you roll it over into the next day. And every day you have these cards. And so you can see when students get frustrated, oh, nothing's been going well. Really? Nothing's been going well? Look at all your gratitude cards, right? Oh, I've never been able to achieve anything. Well, wait a minute. Look at all these things you were able to highlight. And it also shows sometimes you don't have the best day. Maybe you don't achieve anything. Guess what? You roll it over tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. It's literally showing resilience. You might have seen this before, the THINK acronym. There's also, I was in the Rotary for a while, like the 4-way test. Is it true? Is it fair? All of that. So this is a nice acronym. It's also a little bit of some techniques as far as like behavioral techniques where you question reality. Are you sure that's true? And is it really helpful before you do that? And it slows you down. And if I make this choice, is it going to be exciting? Is it going to be inspiring? Is it going to add value? Do I really need to do it? Do I really need to say it? Is it that urgent? And then being kind. And so that's a great acronym to help students be resilient for themselves and for others. And then the last one is another book that I'm going to give you a tip on, Miracle Morning. It's a whole series. There's one specifically, Miracle Morning for Teachers. And basically, it's a way to start your day, like a morning meeting, or it could start your class, or start your morning before you even go off to your workplace. But with students, their workplace is in the class. Savers, Savers, time and time again, very successful, resilient people start their mornings in the same way. They take some moment to be mindful and quiet. They set these intentions. They actually see it happening. They tell themselves good things about themselves. They do something healthy for the physical body, and then some reading and some writing. Now, how great is that to start every morning in your classroom, or as even an entire school-wide, to take a moment to just be quiet and reflective, set some intentions, picture it happening, tell yourself some positive things about yourself, and then the reading and the writing. And I do this as a daily bell ringer every single day. And students said that that's like been extremely valuable for them. And it allows them to go from that emotional state to be thinking and getting all parts of their brain, when even if you just read one little quote, and then how do you feel about that quote? How do you imagine that quote to help you in the future? All right. So I told you there was going to be a lot of them. What I would like you to do at this point is to do some of that visualization, to set some of those intentions right now. If you feel comfortable, if you just close your eyes and just take a nice, clean, cleansing breath. and to be thinking about this time next year. And you think of bringing some resilience practices to yourself, to your students, to mitigate some of the difficult times that we've been having. And they have become resilient. You've become resilient. And what do you see and hear among your students? What shifts have occurred from right now? Were there any tools from tonight that you could see yourself using so that this time next year, resilience is being seen everywhere? And what strengths did you imagine that are special to you as you use some of these tools? And so in a moment, you can open up your eyes and you could come off of mute and share what some of those tools that I just shared with you resonated with you that might add to a resilience this time next year. Anybody have an idea that they'd like to share?
I'll share.
Thank you.
Since I work with you, I know a lot of these tools. And I find that the name it, flip it, frame it has been helpful for me for a very long time. You know, I used to be, and when I say used to be, I'm talking like 20 years ago, I used to be just a total negative ninny. Everything was, you know, what's not working, what's not working. And today I'm more about, okay, well, what is working? And if things aren't working, what can I do to get them working? And so that name it, flip it, frame it is a huge part of that for me. And to get myself to a state where I'm calm enough to be able to do that, because if my lid is flipped, I'm not able to do that. I use, you know, like those breathing practices because I'm a mindfulness practitioner as well. And I have found that that was one of the huge self-regulating tools that I could use was the deep breath, and also just straight up meditation, just learning how to navigate, not only navigate, but just become aware of my own inner thoughts and emotions and how they don't have to rule me. Because not every thought that goes across my brain is valid. Sometimes it's just reaction. You know, they say feelings aren't facts. Sometimes feelings are helpful information to let you know, hey, pay attention right here, something's going on, but they're not always facts. So there's a difference there. So yeah, I would say those are the two biggest tools that you mentioned this evening, although all of them are excellent and can be used in a variety of ways. But those are the two that get me through the most.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to think, it wasn't coming to me a couple 10 minutes ago, but cognitive brain therapy, dialectical brain therapy, as opposed to, you know, peeling back all the layers and getting back to your childhood and why is it that you have these things. It's a lot faster to just say, wait a minute, are you sure that's true? I'm going to challenge you on that. How do you know that's true? Anyone else would like to share any of those tools that you can imagine would make you and your students more resilient?
Sure, I'll go next. I'm a kindergarten aide, so I think I could probably use like the sentence starters and removing the but and just kind of pointing out like the positives for the kiddos, especially those that maybe are having a bad day. And I could, you know, reference it by, I can see you're having a bad day, or I can see you're struggling. What do you think we could do to kind of help that? But I also am a CASA volunteer, and some of these are really helpful because my kiddo is very resilient. She's gone through an awful lot of trauma and PTSD. So I think like the breath and body, I could talk to her about just taking time because she does escalate if something sets her off quickly, just to kind of take a deep breath, think about it, and she'll be in a better spot. And I think the savers might be helpful for her too, like visualize, what she wants. Is it getting through that particular class that she can't do, or is it sitting in school? And just kind of having her trying to be positive and, doing the same thing over and over again, just to kind of get her through the day. So I think these are very helpful as far as that goes for me. So thank you.
Thank you. And I do a lot of the breathing, and my husband, early on in the relationship, he thought I was sighing a lot, like a sarcastic, like, and I'm like, no, that is a calming breath. Trust me, you want me to be doing this right now, because I find it to be very valuable. Just the time it takes to do the breath. It may not even be the oxygen. I mean, the oxygen is always good for the brain. We know that. But I think for me anyway, it's just that time it takes to, and it really does make me feel better. Anyone else? So then I'm going to leave you with a final activity. It's just kind of open. It's right at the hour. I started a couple minutes past. So we're right at that time. It's just going to be an open conversation where I have some pictures of nature, and that's something from appreciative inquiry as well. We are a human living system. We are a collective. We are a community, and most things in nature grow to the light. And so we can get so many cues and wisdom from nature. And so what I'm asking you now and I'm inviting you to do is to take a look at these different pictures in nature. Which one of them resonates with you most to serve as an example or a roadmap for resilience? You can just come off of mute when you see something that inspires resilience.
The lotus flower comes out of resilience for me, because that's like out of the muck. It comes up from at night, and then it comes out during the day, and then it goes back at night. So in the Everglades of Florida, they're all over. So you don't see them in the morning, but you see them all afternoon, and by the night they're gone.
Thank you. Heidi, you came off of mute?
Yeah, this one is always hard for me because I resonate with a lot of this. The one that's speaking to me the most today, for some reason, and maybe because the topic is resilience, is the rocks in the ocean with the waves beating on them. They take a pretty good beating, and yet they're solid, they're strong, they house small little creatures who need them. They're beautiful, and there are, and they shine in the sunshine, when the sun is on them, they just sparkle. I mean, yeah, that one's talking to me today. Other days, some of the other pictures talk to me, but today that's the one I'm gravitating towards.
I think I would have to go with number one, the waterfall. It's just very calming to me for some reason. And it's constant, like no matter what the weather or what the situation, like the water is always going to be there, and it's just constantly, repeating, and I don't know, it's just very relaxing.
And for me, I think number 8 is speaking to me. I think of our earth and how, certain certain forces of nature like lightning bolts, how, in thunderstorms, they can be very violent, they can cause damage. At the same time, there's also part of that cycle where it allows for regrowth and renewal as well. So it can be destructive. And at the same time, it also, for example, a lightning strike might cause a fire. And then that fire will help to regenerate the forest. And there's a wisdom to it. We as humans will feel the effects sometimes, and at the same time that there's a grace to accept it, because we can't really control nature. And how can we coexist and again, be resilient through some destruction and still rise again. So in this time, we did the purpose, we did some appreciation of resilience. So I'm imagining of using these tools, and then finally some reflecting and discussion to put a nice closure on it to the group is the fact that we were here for an hour. What were you most grateful for from this webinar? How do you see this adding value, and what might you need in the future to move forward?
Well, Jen,
oh,
I'm
sorry, Heidi.
grateful for you, bringing this content and joining this organization this month to bring so many tools to people and to educators. I mean, this is what we need in the classrooms. And I appreciate, all of us that were on this call tonight, that there was one other who was here earlier too, just being willing to open up and be on camera and share some deep thoughts. Thanks all.
Anybody else like to share as we close out? Thank you, Heidi.
It's nice to always get a different perspective, because sometimes when you don't have the words, it's good to hear like a different language. So like for me, like these pictures you have here, once I picked one, I started thinking, well, why wouldn't I want to pick another one? And then you just kind of just granulating it as an idea. So that's what I was grateful for, just kind of slow down and reflect on a picture for a while.
Thank you. And when you said that, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't see 20 because my thumbnail was hiding that. Oh, maybe I should have picked that, But then again, like there's always tomorrow. Infinite possibilities and abundance. Lori?
I think I'm grateful for the fact that we could get together tonight, and I apologize again for being late. But I like some of the tools that I learned tonight to help some of my younger kiddos that I work with, as well as my CASA kiddo, to know that you can be resilient and you can bounce back even after really bad things have happened to you. If you just kind of take a breath, think about things, and you'll be able to get through no matter what life throws at you, because life is certainly unpredictable, and it can be scary at times considering everything that's going on. And so I think all these tools are just very helpful in general. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And my hope is that this, is recorded and will be able to be shared out with many, many people, because, as we do know, those positive relationships and high expectations and these tools that will help empower students and children and families and communities, really, that as many people as possible are able to share these life-giving tools. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you to the We Heal campaign. And I hope that we continue all to be doing more of this great work. Thank you for all your contributions to students.
Thank you.
Thank you.